from self-serving direction, the investor want to make sure that you are taking care of environment and social issues in your community so that the business can continue to thrive and they can make money.
The most serious mistake that business leaders make is that they look at ESG in terms of separate buckets.
DKK Talks.
Halo, selamat siang, salam sejahtera dan selamat datang di DKK Talks, How Business Leaders Can Turn ESG into Competitive Edge. Terima kasih kepada kawan-kawan DKK yang sedang menonton atau mendengarkan DKK Talks saat ini. Perkenalkan, saya Bayu Asmara, Managing Director dari DKK Consulting yang selama 1 jam ke depan kira-kira akan menemani kawan-kawan di DKK Talks kali ini. Yang akan membahas topik yang sangat menarik nih, dengan guest speakers yang lebih luar biasa menarik lagi. DKK Talks ini adalah episode perdana yang kita tayang di YouTube ya, dan juga layanan audio streaming seperti Spotify, Anchor, dan Noise. Jadi mungkin kita kenalan dulu sedikit. DKK Talks adalah salah satu program yang ada di DKK Academy. DKK Academy sendiri adalah layanan pelatihan dan pengembangan skill seputar bisnis dan inovasi yang diselenggarakan oleh DKK Consulting. Ditujukan baik untuk individu maupun organisasi atau perusahaan atau mahasiswa, pengusaha maupun profesional. Program-program DKK Academy itu meliputi DKK Talks, seperti yang sedang kita ikutin saat ini, ada DKK Webinar, DKK Workshop, dan DKK In-House Training, program yang lebih intensif atau customized untuk perusahaan-perusahaan dengan kebutuhan yang lebih spesifik. Melalui program-program ini, harapan kami kawan-kawan bisa mendapatkan pengetahuan, pemahaman, dan skill yang berguna bagi pekerjaan maupun aktivitas bisnis kawan-kawan sekalian. Untuk info lebih lanjut, silakan mengunjungi website kami di dkkacademy.id. Kali ini DKK Talks akan membahas topik ESG atau Environmental, Social, and Governance. Di beberapa kesempatan sebelumnya, khususnya di DKK Webinar ya, sudah pernah dibahas mengenai apa ESG itu dan apa urgensinya menerapkan ESG. Kali ini kita akan fokus membahas ESG dari sisi implementasi dan prakteknya. Bagaimana aktualnya business leader di perusahaan melakukan transformasi strategi ESG dan dampaknya seperti apa untuk perusahaan tersebut. Untuk membahas hal tersebut, kita sudah kedatangan pembicara yang spesial nih. Tapi karena kebetulan tamu kita kali ini datang jauh-jauh dari luar negeri, please allow me to switch to English. So first of all, let me introduce the amazing speakers that we have invited to discuss how business leaders can turn ESG into a competitive edge. Our first speaker is Lien, a serial entrepreneur and investor and social impact ecosystem builder. He started Domi, where he serves as chief gardener, and he's also the co-founder for Asia Pacific B Corp Association and launched the official BLAC Taiwan and TIIA. Please welcome Corey. How are you, Corey?
Hi, Bayu. Great to meet you. Hello, everyone.
Hi. Could you tell us a bit about yourself to start the introduction today?
Sure. Thank you for the intro. I think for me, the journey all began as an entrepreneur. I was a passionate business student that I wanted to create something great. Startup company to get to public and engage in various kind of latest trend of business. But I think it's a couple of years ago when I had my second daughter. That's when sustainability, these ESG issues started to have meanings to me. Before I was a bystander. I look at it, I was like, yeah, there's only hippies talk about it. But it started like, I think a couple of years, maybe 10, 15 years into business, I started to realize that business got a lot to do with it. And if we don't take something, if we don't act something towards it, it's good, it's important that government and NPOs doing something. But if business don't involve heavily, nothing will really change. So that kind of took me to the second journey in my life to started, engaging issues like this, building up ecosystems for Taiwan, and then supporting other countries to do the same thing. And it's a great honor to work with DKK on this occasion. Thank you.
Great, that's a great story. Thank you so much. I'm sure we're going to get a lot of discussion out of your, because of seeing of all your passion. But before we go any further, let me introduce our second guest today. Our second speaker is Miriam Garvi. Miriam is an educator, consultant, and researcher with more than 10 years experience in leadership for sustainability in Asia. She's the Deputy Director of the Center for Responsible Internalization and Leadership, board member of Eden Foundation, and co-founder and director of Vision Pioneers. Hello, Miriam. How are you today?
Hi, Bayu. I'm great. It's very hot during the summer, but it's really exciting to be here. And hi, everyone.
Thank you so much for coming. Why don't you introduce yourself a bit so we get to know where you're coming from?
Sure. So for me, I come a little bit more perhaps from the leadership angle. I have this academic and consulting background from Sweden, and then spent the last decade or so here in Asia. And it's been a really interesting development, I feel, these past 7 years or so, that we really see the focus on issues related to corporate social responsibility, issues related to sustainability challenges, and so on, have also become part of the conversation here in Asia. So that's very exciting. And what's really been on my mind is how is that influencing, how is that affecting how we think about leadership and how we exercise leadership in companies today at multiple levels, and what does that mean for how we do business in a way that takes both our impact on environmental society into account. So this past year, we had the opportunity to develop this new leadership program together with Corey and Domi, and now we have the opportunity to bring it to Indonesia, right, in partnership with DKK. So that's a really exciting journey. And I'm very happy to be here with everyone this afternoon and looking forward to our conversation today on ESG.
Great, thank you so much. Like you mentioned, it's starting to become part of the conversation in Indonesia. That's why I'm really excited for you for today when we can talk about our special topic for today, which is how business leaders can turn ESG into competitive edge. We'll dive into a bit about what ESG is, and then specifically in the role of leadership in its implementation. Like you mentioned, ESG is still a relatively new topic in Indonesia, but I think a lot of people are starting to be interested in it, from large companies, even to tech startups, and of course to investors. So like I mentioned, this will be kind of informal, casual talk about ESG. So we'll start about the kind of the definitions, and then we'll look into how it can actually be implemented and starting the ESG journey itself in companies. But you can provide some examples on that. So let's start with the basics, right? So probably Corey, you can start. What is ESG? So most people may know that it stands for environmental, social, and governance, but what is it really about? What does it have to do with sustainability, and what are the key drivers for it? Okay,
so I think the acronym is important. At least once you spell it out, you kind of define what it is. And I think a critical take on it is to think of it as a bucket of three separate buckets that company are doing and should be doing and will be accounted for in the future, right? So right now it's kind of a way for us to put our initiative, our designs, and how we operate into the three buckets. And before I think the key driver, there's two main drivers to this. I think one is the government, especially the security councils, right, to managing stock exchanges. Is that globally we all see there's a planet problems. A lot of countries are in problems right now, and these burden cannot be just on the government or NPO anymore, because simply they just don't have enough resource or training or capacity to deal something at the scale level. So I think they're turning into corporates, which has the ability to communicate with masses of consumers, and trying to ask the corporate to behave, to have this initiative inside the organization to tackle these issues. And then the second driver that I'm observing, which I think it's even a more predominant driver, is the investors.
Mhm.
So this is a driver that we didn't necessarily see before on the CSR era, that investors are really pushing for this to come through. Before investor, I think their main purpose is making money. So they want to make sure that you do G well, right? Your governance needs to be well so that when you make money, I make money, right?
Yeah.
You're not trying to trick me with accounting or anything. But now they realize that they cannot make money on a dying planet, right? They cannot make money on the dying economy or country anymore, right? If these countries are having all these issues, the business will not be able to operate well. So I want to kind of put a more cynical angle, is that from self-serving direction, the investor want to make sure that you are taking care of environment and social issues in your community, so that the business can continue to thrive and they can make money. The other angle for investor is more of an altruistic angle, is that they do want the world to be better too. If they can have something to do with it. So I think this term of ESG gets created to let the corporate know that yes, this is our emphasis now, that you need to look at that. The largest investor globally, the Blackstones, they actually issue a statement this year, a handbook to the CEOs, that I want you to work on this, right? So I think that's the second key main driver. So a simple way, before you have to talk about take care of EPS, your earning per share.
Yes.
Now you have to take care of your EGS, right? Your environment, government, and social, right? Just think of it that way. All right. Thank you.
Great. That's very interesting. That's a great point looking at, one of the key drivers is investors, and there are actually two, because people start thinking when it's about investors, they'll never, like you mentioned, a cynical way of looking at it. They'll never really go into this environmental and social impact aspect. But you mentioned there's actually a self-service element of it, which makes it really possible and actually implementable, and make sure that still making money. You can't make money out of a dying planet. You can't make money of a chaotic society. That's a very interesting angle to it. But then there's an actually interesting. You also mentioned that the one of the larger investors went out and telling all the CEOs that they need to implement this. So that becomes a question of who is ESG for, right? So is it only for the big business, the huge corporations with huge investors that really need to apply this, or can it actually be applied by the upcoming companies, the new startups, or even just mom and pop companies? What do you think, Miriam?
Yeah, thank you, Bayu. Well, I think the obvious answer to that question, first of all, if we think about a dying planet, or even we think about the social unrest that can come from rising inequalities that we see, increased cost of living, etc., is that, yeah, it should be relevant for everyone, right?
Yes.
And not just for everyone, not just for thinking in terms of business size, but also geographically, no matter where we are in the world. I mean, personally, I come from Sweden. We are calling in from Taiwan, and this is happening in Indonesia, right? And no matter we're in Sweden, Taiwan, or Indonesia, I think we all have sustainability challenges to deal with. And the role that companies play with respect to those challenges are relevant everywhere. And I think also when we think about ESG, it does really reflect the multiple expectations that different stakeholders have of companies today, because that is getting quite complex, actually. When you think about the past, maybe it was sufficient to focus on our core stakeholders. So, I'm making sure that my customers are getting what they want. I'm making sure that we're making money. So, my investors are happy. And the government, of course, will be happy if I'm providing jobs for people. And of course, I'm respecting the law. And my employees will be happy as long as I pay them decent wages, right? But it's not, the picture is not quite that simple anymore, because now stakeholders from different areas, including what we just heard, BlackRock from the investor side, then one example, are asking more of companies. And so now we're being asked to show that, are we meeting customer demand with high operational efficiency, but are we at the same time being innovative? And are we being innovative in what way? Are we also, paying attention to these environmental challenges where there's a lot that needs to be done on the material side, on the process side, etc. And are we being resource efficient? Are we using energy efficiently? Are we using water efficiently? Are we paying attention to waste? Are we helping conserve biodiversity? And then on the social side, are we also doing business in an ethical manner? Refraining from practices such as bribery, corruption? Are we respecting fundamental human rights? Are we taking into account equal opportunities for men and women alike, etc., etc.? These are questions that stakeholders nowadays from different domains or spheres really care more about. So we are being asked how we contribute to and influence society in multiple ways, and that's of course a question for large companies, but that's also a question for smaller companies, that business leaders really do need to develop their own understanding of these issues and identify the position that they want to take here, based on what they see is needed, not just for today, but also for the future. Great. So I think in terms of, the sizes, there's been a lot of focus on compliance and regulation, focusing more on the larger companies. But we can also see very interesting examples from Taiwan, for example, from the SME scene. So it's certainly also applicable to smaller business.
Great, that's interesting. And one of the things that was interesting to me is that we need to do this because of the increasing expectations, and everyone needs to think about their impact, right? So every companies, even the small ones, have impact to that, the society, to the environment, and doing things responsibly. So I guess, and of course, small companies dream to be big, right? So they have to start thinking about that. So I think we'll touch a bit on that later, on that the ESG journey itself. But there's one question that people actually have a lot. The term ESG is often used interchangeably with corporate social responsibility, or CSR, or corporate sustainability. So we're wondering, are they actually the same? Do they share the same values or the same concepts? Can you start, Corey?
Sure. I think that's kind of related to when you ask the small business, how would that work, right? And I kind of want to take a look at that in terms of corporate social responsibility first. Is that back in the days, a lot of small business, they take responsibility for their community, right? They make sure that their product is safe, it's honest, and then they take care of their neighbors. They take care of their communities. And I think that's what CSR stands for. And that doesn't mean that you need to be small or big. It was a term, that got cornered, but it was intended that company was already behaving like that. And can we behave like that even if you're a big company, right? So it's interesting that when I look back, there's about 5,000 benefit corporation. I'll explain what B Corp is a little later. But company that's behaving this way is designing the business model this way. The first two company, the first company is a travel agency, right? A small local travel agency. The second company is actually a restaurant, right? So I think the concept of corporate social responsibility in the days is that people already be taking on those responsibility, when they are small. And so to look at now the development, after CSR, we start driving company for sustainability and now ESG? The quick answer is yes, that it's all the same value. But I think right now it's providing a perspective that you have no excuse to escape from it. Okay, I think it's like the magical triangle now, right? We have CSR on one side, we have sustainability on one side, and we have ESG on one side. And like, what is your excuse of not doing it now, right? So excuse like ESG come from investor, right? So now the investor is giving you the permission, go do it, right? Before you can use me as a excuse is that the shareholder won't support it. Now you don't. You have to do it. For CSR, I look at it as something that's driven by the group of employees inside the organization, that there's something that they care about, that they want to make change. We look at small organizations, they make donations for hospitals, they go out and help elderlies. It's something authentic inside the organization that the employee care about. They want to make money, by the same time, they want to do something meaningful. That's the second force, right? The third force is that globally, we know we're not sustainable. The planet is no longer sustainable. So it's a force that's driven from public and that's driven from government. So now we have this new space open. As a business school student, we never had this space before, right? Now, as business, you have a new space that is an empty space, it's a brand new space that trigger from the three factors. And the key part is now, what is the business people going to do with that space, right? Maybe I'll pass to Miriam and see if Miriam can, show us some examples about how people do with that space.
Sure, thank you, Corey. Yeah, one example that comes to mind when we think about this is Danone and the what the past years how they have redefined their corporate purpose. So I don't know if everybody is well familiar with that company, but they're a world leader in dairy, and about 100 years ago is where they started out as a yogurt maker. So we tend to know them for the for the yogurt brands, but they're also a big producer of bottled water, right, and plant-based milk products, specialized nutrition, etc. I think you know them quite well in Indonesia.
Yes. From the Aqua brand.
Yeah.
They bought
Right,
Aqua. Yes, that's right.
Yeah, so under their previous CEO, they underwent this process of redefining their purpose to really try to reflect what it actually means to be a progressive food company in the 21st century. And I really want to stress that because I think that's a critical leadership question right now. And they have been calling on everyone actually in the food industry to really start addressing some of the big elephants in the room that people don't easily talk about, such as the hidden amounts of salt and sugar in our food, or the huge environmental problems that follow from industrial agriculture that these products rely on, or the chronic diseases that we're suffering from in society, diabetes, obesity, etc., or the rising inequalities. And on their mind has also been the fact that actually the right to adequate food is a human right, going back 70 years or so. So if the food situation for people in the world would deteriorate too much, then what do we think would happen? So for them, it's really been about looking at then how can we make sure that we have a healthy ecosystem for food, and what is the customer promise that we can make and should make, in order to be a sustainable company for the future. So what they do is they express their purpose as they're bringing health through food to as many people as possible. And I think by now, about 60% of their global sales are under B Corp certification. So that's a certification, right? That's a certification that shows that the company is quite determined to do business in a way that's good, not only for the bottom line, but also has a constructive impact in society. And they're keeping their stakeholders very updated on the pace at which they're reformulating, for example, their recipes or switching to agroecology practices, etc. So I think this is a good example of important work that shows what can be done and what actually needs to be done within this space in many industries.
Great. That's interesting. Yeah, Danone is very familiar in Indonesia because of they bought Aqua brand, the brand Aqua, and they have suddenly been pushing the industry in terms more to being more sustainable. They're the pioneer and on creating the recyclable bottles, and they're pushing on the glass bottles. I've been talking to them. I have a few friends over there also, and their mindset is definitely on turning everything into more sustainable, because it has. He mentioned that Indonesia especially has been getting a lot of pressure globally because of the plastic bottles, one-time use bottles of the Aqua. That's a bottled mineral water brand in Indonesia, and they're trying to everything on from the small SKUs, the glass one, to the largest SKUs. They're trying to see how they can make that more sustainable. That's very interesting. That it's not just in Indonesia, but that's a global driving force globally. That's very interesting. So before anything that you'd like to add, Corey, before I move on to the actual ESG journey itself?
Well, I think I was there in the beginning when Danone started this initiative about 5 years ago. That globally they bring together the key companies. So Aqua was one of them, to start on their B Corp journey, and then to start on sustainability, to see what do they think that's meaningful for each company to do. And I think that's a very innovative approach for large company, is that they're looking for a bottom-up angle. So what is important for your company in your country that matters?
Yes.
So a couple of years back, I think it was 2018, I was in Indonesia to celebrate Aqua acquiring the B Corp certification. And it was very interesting because they were quite nervous, right? They had this annual event of gathering everybody together. And I actually didn't quite understand what they're so nervous about. Turns out they have decided a few things. One, to return the Aqua name back to Indonesia. So they're removing the Danone name from Aqua's logo. And that's a big statement, right? For them to signal that they want to shift the mindset that they don't want to continue to extract from Indonesia, grabbing out the water, getting the plastic bottles, shipping to people. But they want to start thinking, what can we do? And then that's when they also started with the recycling program. And they're recycling more than what they sell. I think they sell about 60% of the water bottles in Indonesia right now.
Yes.
But they're recycling more than that. So that because the plastic, contamination in the islands is a huge problem.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then they also started an ownership program for the teams to become owners of Aqua. So I think that's a very different mindset that when I look at Asia, right now we have 44% carbon emission coming from here, and 41% of extreme poverty come from Asia. I think company here should see this space as a great opportunity on one, to innovate, on second, to meet those expectations for their customer. And that's what I've been seeing with what Aqua is doing. And they're combining ESG, CSR, and sustainability together as one. It's not three pieces, right? And I think that's very important to think about that.
Exactly. That's very interesting. You mentioned about the islands, because here in Jakarta we have the a small set of islands, what we call the Thousand Islands archipelago. I did a project a few years back, and in a way you can see a lot of initiatives from Aqua at the time. They're recycling a lot of the bottles, and they're repurposing it for all things, the facilities, public facilities over there. But on the other hand, when you look to the sea, the brand that you see on the waters on the beach are Aqua brands. So they have that responsibility of I remember the thing that you mentioned previously about this makes business sense, right? You don't want your brand to be associated with all the trash on the beaches, right? They do a lot of things, and like you mentioned, this is a combination of the CSR programs of Aqua and actual the whole investment or business mindset in the ESG concept, which is very interesting to observe happening in Indonesia. So then, I guess hearing you explain about 5 years ago, they were actually nervous when they started their journey doing this. So it comes back to the question on: is there a right time to start an ESG journey for firms? Yeah, in your observations, probably Corey, how do they start this ESG journey, and what are the challenges that actually face in starting the journey towards ESG?
I think the angle to look at it is similar to a business angle. It's that what kind of company do you want to be? I kind of see this at multiple levels. If you want to get to this ESG journey, you kind of need to think about where do you want to end at this ESG journey? What is the final vision and output? And we're seeing companies that's starting with, I just want to comply, right? So if there's regulations or laws, let's comply with that. And that's who we want to be. And then we see another layer of companies that they want to be case makers. They want to make something different, and they want themselves and other people is able to see those examples. And then we see another level of people is that they're innovators, that they're finding a way to integrate the whole thing so that they can innovate their company to a next level. And then just now when we're talking about Danone, what we're seeing with Danone globally is that they want to become a game changer for the industry. So Miriam was mentioning that when they started this journey, they don't only started with Danone, they actually started reaching out to the people in the industry and asking the industry to recognize one huge elephant in the room, which is we are the one that's making people sick. And that's a huge recognition that they're asking people to take in, to swallow, to acknowledge, right? It's like, they were asking Nestle, they were asking all these food companies, including themselves, is that we create a way for people to have very easy access to food, but we are putting a lot of different stuff that they should not be eating. And we are responsible for that, right? Because people cannot choose what they eat based on the price and accessibility that they are under. That's why they're buying our food. Right? Otherwise, they would have just go to the farmers, make their own food, but they're not. So I think thinking about the endpoint is very important. How do we see ourselves, and using that endpoint as a starting point, and then to start bringing people, weaving people together towards that direction to ripen the issue. In the case of Danone, the issue that they're ripening for other people to be aware is that we are the one that's making people sick. So we need to innovate our product. We need to innovate our research and resources so that consumer can be healthy when they eat our food. Right? And maybe I can share an example that we work with IKEA, right? So globally, IKEA had a commitment to become people planet positive, right?
Yeah.
So the endpoint for them is that when you interact with IKEA, you are making people and planet better. That's a big statement, right? We're not just making you a happy home. You just buy a cheap, nice, furniture for your home, but you need to be making people and planet better. But under that, they have a very specific message that they want to bring other people in, which is commitment for 1.5 degree climate, not 2 degrees. And that means include your country and my country, which are the islands, right? Yeah. Because above 1.5 degree, we don't exist.
Exactly.
Right? But globally, the UN agree on 2 degrees. So IKEA, from their perspective, they made a commitment. We're not just going to be making things positive, but we want to invite everybody to commit to 1.5. So that is a strong stand and approach that you're driving people towards to. So from that, on one hand, they start doing analysis on what is contributing in IKEA for carbon, right? They realize that 51% is from material. But the interesting number is that they realize 16% of carbon emission is from how people use their product. Mm. So the company is similar to what Bayu was saying, is that the plastic bottle ending up on the beach is Aqua's responsibility, right? And that's what IKEA is saying. How you use the product at your home is IKEA's responsibility. It's not yours only, right? So we're seeing this approach of ESG is that the company, doesn't matter big or small, when you are willing to care for more, then the stuff that you care for more is willing to care for you. So if you only care about how people are paying for your product, or you care about how that person's life and what they care about and how they use the products, your customer will care for you in a different way. And that's why we're seeing how small company or new startups or large companies are having this new perspective of ESG. So kind of in short is that the first thing is about who do we want to be, right? You need to ask you that. The second is, who do we want to impact? And then the third one is, what is the key issue we want to people? We want to ripen these issues with people. I think you see that with, the demonstration of IKEA and they know that's what they're working on right now. Thank you.
That's great. I was struck by how Dano started their conversation, right? Just bringing people together in the industry and making this bold statement that, yeah, we are the ones that are making people sick. That's a really bold thing to do, and even for Dano and Aqua to look at the polluted seas and the beaches and say these are our products, right? So, and you mentioned that there's this payoff of things that if you care for the customers and the customer will care for you. So, allow me to be a bit from a cynical point of view, right? So, all these challenges, all these things that you need to be, you need to be brave, you need to challenge your customer, challenge the industry. What is actually the impact of implementing ESG for these business leaders, for the company? Is there actually a performance impact of implementing ESG? Does it actually create value for the company? And if we do, how so? Right, Corey.
Well, I think there's a couple of things. On one, when companies doing this, it's what we call impact business model design, right? That the whole model is that if you are able to care for consumers or your customer or society or environment better, your consumer will reflect that with you. And as your business start to grow bigger, on the opposite, these issues will become better also. So the design is that it's a little bit different from how people use CSR in the past. CSR wasn't intended to be used this way, but we end up using it as kind of a philanthropy, right? Yeah, that's something that we donate. So it's not related to our business development. We could be making 100 billion, but we could be donating 0.1 million, right? Okay, and then next year we make 500 million, right? We make less money, but we're still donating something very, very little. Or if we make more money, we still very, very little, right? And that's different. That's a different type of communication with their customer. But when you combine with impact business model, meaning that as you grow, this line continue to grow with business. So you are your performance is directly related to it. So so we're seeing a lot of company actually, become better for that because their customers are choosing them to the competitors because they know they are not just buying the product, but they're also buying the impact with it. Okay.
I see. Yeah.
And then so maybe I'll share with an example of Logitech, right? Most of people have their keyboard mouse on their table, right?
Yeah, yeah. My mouse is Logitech. Yeah. Yeah.
And they are a design company, right? They're positioned as a design company, right? And when they are actually very, very young to this ESG sustainability journey, only a couple of years, right? If you take out COVID, it's only a few, right? Very, very few years. And their company's whole philosophy before was called design with people, right? That was their core philosophy. But when they start going into this journey of sustainability, they start to shift everything. And then they come up with this new mindset of business. Is that they need to design, they turn it into what they call design 4.0, design for sustainability for people and the planet, right? So that means that all the product they design, on one hand, need to be circular, but on the other hand, need to have social impact, right? And then they are going into their employees, their partners, their customers, and Wall Street to start lobbying, like to start telling people about this is where they're going, right? And they are responding, right? Consumers responding because think about it, if you're buying this mouse and you are maybe that 10% of people in the world that care about environment. Let's just be pessimistic for now. There's only 10% of people cares. This 10% of people will not go to Microsoft or somebody else to buy that mouse because their product it's 100% by 2021 it's 100% carbon neutral, right? So for the people that cares, it's a huge operation to be carbon neutral. Think about it, right?
Yes.
They ship globally. So if you look at from competitors' perspective, you're gaining that 10% of customer that before might not have that level of loyalty to you than other people, right? And then so like for another company that Domi is working with right now is a company called Mamo. They're the largest heavy moving company in the world, right? They support mining, power, renewable energies to move all these large equipments across the world and being installed. And for them right now, they're also thinking about, it's our sustainability about just turn EV, become electrical vehicle to be more efficient to use materials, resources, or what is sustainability for us? So they're taking on this journey of really discovering that this ESG thing, it's actually very, very local. And they are formulating their strategy to think, what is the local impact that we can do with our business? What would be meaningful and also strategic for our business to operate in a new way? So I think right now the companies are all seeing this possibility that on one hand, investor back them up. On second, their customer also need it. And that's how it reflects into their business financial impacts.
Great. So one of the key things is it's not looking this, not what we did to CSR, which we reduced it. A lot of us reduced it to just philanthropy. So ESG is definitely not just that. It's actually part of the business, right? As it grows, it's part of the company process itself, and so that's why even the ESG impact itself should grow with the performance of the company because it's part of the performance itself. That's very interesting. Talking about that, then you need to implement ESG in the correct way, right? So probably, Miriam, you could give us some insight on what are the common mistakes of business leaders usually when they implement the ESG strategies. Is there a few tips and tricks that you could mention about how they can do it properly, and how can they overcome the challenges and the problems that may arise?
Sure. I think, going back to what Corey was talking about in the very beginning, we have ESG, that's ESG. It's different buckets. And I think the most serious mistake that business leaders make is that they look at ESG in terms of separate buckets. And that tends to translate into quite ad hoc actions. We do a bit here, we do a bit there, but there's no integrated thinking behind it, and there's no real strategy for it. And there was this report that Bain and Company published last year, talking about the opportunities for companies on the road to net zero with focus on Southeast Asia. And they were really highlighting how in this region, sustainability hasn't yet become part of the core, that companies don't really seem to know how to integrate these concerns with their core business. And so they lack that capability to really embed it properly into the organization. So we don't have that kind of sustainability DNA that we often talk about when we look at, really like the sustainability role models, where if you ask any worker about, the work that they're doing, they would be able to tell you why and why it's important and how it relates to sustainability. So I believe that would be the case for, if you ask that question at Logitech. And they also point out that, there's a unrealized opportunity there in terms of companies not really using sustainability as a catalyst for innovation. So globally, we do see that there are more and more companies like Logitech, for example, who look at ESG and sustainability more in terms of a paradigm shift. So that means that there's a before and after. And it means that we're thinking fundamentally a lot of things about the coherent thinking behind it and strategy and so on also needs to shift, not only certain specific practices in these different buckets. So even we need to transition into new ways of creating value. So I think when we treat ESG as something that, when we don't treat it as something that's fundamentally part of a strategy, but we're looking more at how we add a few more layers to what people in different functions do, then we have a lot of silos, and that's very dangerous, right? We think of ESG as different technical tasks. We assign it to different departments, and then when it reaches the board level, it's more about compliance, it's more about risk. And then it's really not uncommon to find that you talk to people about what they're doing, they have no idea about how their own company is working to address these issues. And that really is a missed opportunities in just so many ways. So there's typically a big gap in communication. And that means that people inside the companies don't really understand the issues and why it's relevant to them, to their work, to their industry. I think we need to do, that needs to be addressed very consciously. And instead, they tend to see it just as another request, something that they should comply with. And this kind of compliance culture that we then help to perpetuate is quite problematic, I would say, for ESG, because the issues are becoming more complex. And we do need a different approach to handle such complexity.
Oh, that's interesting. So, so not treating ESG as separate items and using making sure that there's a communication in the company to make sure that this is not just compliance. This is something that you need to do to shift the way that you do business in itself. That's very interesting.
Bayu, if I may add, I think it comes down to our fundamental perspective on how we view things as well. Because as long as we see it as technical issues that need to be resolved, so for example, I'm being asked for more data, right, on my environmental management, or I need to comply with this or this standards, very technical. But as long as we just look at it that way, I think we're not really having the right perspective. We also need to recognize that it's actually a big adaptive challenge. So it's something that requires of us to examine what are our current values and attitudes and norms, And, how do we also shift them so that we are much more in line with this new sustainability mindsets. So examining our perspective there and helping people to understand the purpose, where we're heading, what Kari was talking about before, and helping them to see the direction. I think it's very critical.
Great. So that's actually an interesting point that kind of relates to the next question, actually. And you mentioned about not having ESG as kind of just an extra task, something that you need to do, right? So on the bigger perspective, how do you make companies actually implement ESG for this real change, instead of merely checking boxes and publishing reports and just this is what people want, we'll just do this just for the sake of doing it because everybody's asking for it. So probably that's a good thing to kind of wrap up the whole discussion, right? So what do you think, Miriam? How can we make sure that ESG is really making impact from what these companies are doing?
Okay. I think we need to think in terms of culture, ESG culture and ESG culture. So not just issues, not just management, but also culture, and allow things to permeate a little bit more deeply what we do. So right now, because there are many requests, many new issues that are on our agenda, it means we're widening our scope a bit. We have to broaden the issues that we're looking at. But we also need to think about how do we go deeper. So we're not just making superficial adjustments referring to the ESG trend, or we're participating in different awards in this space so that we're able to project an image to stakeholders about what we're doing that we want to live up to, but we need to help our organization more deeply to actually deal with these issues. And a company that has done that very well in the past and quite early on is Novo Nordisk in the pharmaceutical industry. It's the leading provider of insulin. Mm. And they very early on, at the turn of the century already, they started to transition to a very strong ESG culture, in the sense that they clarify that every single business decision that they make, it should be able to respond to 3 different questions. So it's guided not only by the financial responsibility, but also, is it socially responsible? Is it environmentally responsible? And they stayed consistent on that path. And then, along with such core values, they've created structures to handle this, and they've encouraged practices that can really spread that ambition throughout the company, so that it becomes part of the DNA of their culture. And one of the key practices that they have been very well known for early on is their strong stakeholder dialogues, that they've had close interaction with patients, with NGOs, with other stakeholders to better understand their needs and concerns. So I think that's a very good example of how you really need to allow ESG to permeate more deeply your own culture and help your organization to embrace it in different ways.
Great, that's very interesting. ESG culture. Kari, anything like that on that?
I think there are many reporting standards that exist right now, GRI, CDP, and even if you want to measure a particular project that you're doing well on that, you can use SRI to do that. And earlier on I mentioned about B Corp. There's about 5,000 companies globally that became B Corp. And that gives the company kind of everybody in that organization a permission to make change. So I think that's also another way to kind of make sure that you're heading in the right direction. And so I think that the most critical thing, like these reporting or making these changes, it has to be for something. What are we doing this for, right? ESG are buckets. These buckets for you to kind of tally on what you did. But the main thing is that when you stack all these things up, what is the vision? Where is the direction that we are going into? And why is that vision meaningful to everybody in our company, to our customer, and then to our suppliers? I think that's a very, very critical question that they need to ask, is what is meaningful, right? So just kind of a quick, something that I grew up with, kind of this little stories that when you ask somebody when they're laying the bricks, it's like, what are you doing? They're like, I'm laying the brick. But then if you ask somebody, another person say, I'm building a beautiful cathedral, right? That's a totally different answer because it has meaning for these different people. And with that meaning, that real direction and that real compassion and energy gets unleashed inside the organization. And I love this analogy is that like I'm helping putting the man on the moon when Kennedy was asking a janitor inside NASA, what are you doing? You're like, I'm not sweeping the floor. I'm putting men on the moon. So I think that's the opportunity that corporate has now. That before 80% of the global financial resource are with corporates, right? Next, close to 10% goes to the government, 11 is go to the NPOs. So right now the corporate, one has the resource, second has the permission from this magical triangle of ESG, CSR, and sustainability. What do you do with that space? Can we bring our organization into a meaningful journey that we could be doing telecom services, we could be providing energy, but what are we help shaping our nation to, our country, our community into something different? If the issue we have as a nation is diversity, can we deal that diversity inside our company? If our nation is environmental issues, doesn't matter what business you're doing, can we take on the responsibility and make that meaningful with everybody? It could be 3 people, it could be 30,000 people, that we are building meaningful stuff, not in our after office time, which what CSR is doing, but do it during the day. I think that's the key part about ESG, to think of unleashing that energy that everybody care about and put that to work.
Great. I think that's a great wrap up on the ESG journey and ESG implementation. Like you said, allowing ESG to kind of permeate the culture and the mindset, and kind of giving everyone purpose and meaning, and not only that, but kind of giving them permission to create an initiative for change inside the company itself. That's I think a very impactful way to look at ESG. And I guess hopefully everyone can get a lot from our discussion today. But before we wrap up and we end the session, is there anything you'd like to add? Probably some additional info or where you can point people to should they want to learn more about ESG? Probably Corey, you want to start?
Okay, Miriam, do you have something you wanted to add before we go forward?
Well, maybe I can just echo the point that you just made about meaning and purpose, because I think another way to also think about ESG that aligns with that is we think about our legacy, which is, typically something that people do towards in the later stage of our lives, when we're approaching retirement, or we're thinking about, what am I passing on to the people who will take over for me, right? But I think it's about carrying that with us already today, which is actually how we define sustainable development as well, that we're thinking about not just, our own generation being able to consume what it needs, but also future generations, creating those opportunities. So Novo's the CEO for Novo that led Novo through this transformation, he was talking a lot about legacy and saying that, what's important is for him is that the company becomes well known not just for the results it achieves, but also for the ways in which those results are being achieved. And that goes back to us being very deliberate about, or conscious about, what's the purpose and perspective that we want to have. We have this space opening up here, and we have options and we have choices. And I think both for Corey and me, that's what makes these times so exciting, that we have choices to do there. And so for us, what we've done is that we've developed a leadership program that can help people, no matter you're at the top of the organization, or you're the founder, you're thinking about, more strategically, perhaps, how you want to direct your company and take your company into the future. Or you're at other levels in the organization and you're thinking about, how do I align and connect what I do, what my team does, what I see around me as being down? How do I connect that to these sustainability challenges? And how do I bring these questions of purpose and meaning, perhaps also legacy, into my everyday work? And we've created that with particularly with the context here in Asia in mind. So we would encourage everybody to consider joining that program, because it's a great program.
So for me, I think thank you, Miriam. I think for me, there's three things. One, our conversation and dialogues is important. So if you're listening to this in podcast, whatever format, leave your message, because then we can start a conversation and have this interaction so that we can all acclimatize ourselves into this new world that I think is really a paradigm shift right now. Before you are egg, now you're a chicken. When that's paradigm shift, we're in somewhere else in this world right now. So we need to acclimatize ourselves to it. So please leave your, people that's listening, leave the message, start the conversation. And then the second point is that I don't want to go into business 30, 40 years when I retire and I become a great salesman, right? That's all what we've been doing in business. We're trade marketing, we're trade sales, end up being a great salesman at the end, but that's not the legacy I want my children or myself to remember. I want to be a great salesman. We make a great business, we make a lot of money. By the same time, I really made a change where I come from, where I live. So I think that's the key part that I really want to stress for Asia right now. We need to work together. There's a lot of countries that we're exposing with all this new information, and our economy are going really fast. We need to work together right now. So what Miriam is mentioning about the program is that DKK and Domi, we're working together to bring people in Asia that is right now considering these questions or already facing these challenges, or want to take leadership in these challenges to work on it together. For example, in this September, like Garvi and Telkomsel, all these companies will be in this cohort. We're able to work on it together on these issues, so we can really learn it in a practical way, not as something that we read in other countries. And we can really build something that makes difference next year, end of this year, that we are seeing those changes that we can really feel the impact in our life. Thank you.
Great. So if you're really interested in learning more, please join the program. We'll be providing more details on the description, of course, and creating that conversation, right? I think that's very interesting way to look at Korea. Thank you so much. So join the program and let us talk about how actually what are the challenges actually implementing ESGs and being a responsible company and in Indonesia. What does it actually mean, and in Asia, in the bigger sense. Great. That is an amazing conversation. Thank you again, Corey and Miriam, for your time and energy. Before I just close the session, do you have any links or contacts or socials that you can share so people can get in touch with you and learn more about your work? You start, Miriam. Where can people find you?
Where can people find me? So they can find me at Miriam Garvi at visionpioneers.net, and I'm happy to provide that link too for anybody who wants to reach out. They can also find me on LinkedIn, Miriam Garvi. Happy to connect with anybody there as well.
Great. How about you, Corey?
Same thing. Find me on LinkedIn, and then be in the program so we can work on it together. So I'll
Definitely.
I'll send the links afterward also, so people can look at it.
Great. Thank you. With that, we've come to the end of the session. Thank you, Corey and Miriam, for your outstanding explanation of ESG and for your hands-on experience that you shared in the discussion. I hope we've all learned something new in the session today, especially on how to grow our business, not just in terms of profit and performance, but also in impact and how we make a change in this world. Thank you for watching and listening. Don't forget to follow our Instagram, Spotify, Anchor, and Noise, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Search for DKK Academy. That's DKK space ACADEMY. And look out for the next episode of DKK Talks. DKK Academy, elevate your skills, innovate for change. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.
DKK Talks.